campaign next quarter look like it's going to be a winner. But we're also
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. We'll be talking about ROA, defining analytics benefits. But before we get started, I do want to share a little bit about my background so that you really understand why I think that matters. And a quick introduction, my name is Selma. I want you guys to follow me on LinkedIn also. So I saw somebody posted their LinkedIn profile in the chat. If you are active on LinkedIn, make sure to follow me and request a connection. I'm very active in the community, so I'd love to meet up also. And so now let's kind of do a deep dive on my background and why I think this stuff matters. In a previous life, I always joke before I sold my soul to corporate, I worked as a researcher for state and local governments, often doing economic and fiscal impact studies. And so I would be responsible for identifying the fiscal impact of new state policies, or I would estimate the overall economic development impact on economic development. And so this was often used to calculate if tax incentives were worth our government's investment. Then I went on to work for NCR, the Home Depot, and I'm leading the Analytics Center of Excellence at Carter's. And throughout my career, I've worked on teams that have really struggled to identify ROI of their efforts, and they had no frameworks in place. But I've also worked on teams that have done a really good job of quantifying the impact of their efforts and identifying tangible incomes. So I think that this presentation is really going to be a combination of lessons learned, but also some of the research that I've done in this space. And to me, this stuff matters because we're making deep investments in AI/ML, but I don't think that we're really clear on what costs or at what cost. Deloitte did a study in 2017 that found that by 2025, our demand for machine learning platforms was going to be around $20 billion. And they forecasted that growth at over 38% between 2017 and 2025. So we're making really deep investments in machine learning platforms. And there was another study that I read that said that companies are dedicating over $1 million of their annual budgets to advanced analytics, particularly in the AI/ML space. And they're not slowing down. They're committed to making deeper investments. So for me, from all the research that I've done and the organizations where I've worked over time, I can see that we're spending a lot of money. And I was curious, are we reaping the benefits? I found a study that was conducted by MIT in collaboration with BCG in 2020. So it was right around the start of the pandemic. And they found that only about 10% of organizations are reporting realizing significant financial benefits of advanced analytics. And so for me, when I kind of think about all of these statistics and the research that I've done, I think that there's this story that organizations have FOMO, right? This fear of missing out, and that the opportunity cost of not enabling advanced analytics is so high that companies are committed to investing millions of dollars in the space without truly really understanding what they stand to gain from it. And it's a risk that they're willing to take, I think, because they believe that advanced analytics is inherently beneficial, right? There are some benefits to gain from it. And I think part of those benefits that they associate are competitive advantage. This presentation is going to walk you through a framework to identify your ROA. But really throughout this presentation, I want us to redefine the way that we think about AI/ML. And I particularly want us to reframe advanced analytics into decision analytics and start thinking about data science through the lens of decision sciences, right? This isn't really going to be just an exercise of costs and benefits. This is going to be a framework for bridging the gap between data scientists, practitioners, and business leaders. And part of the problem is without really understanding the decision that our analysis will enable, that why that I have over here, you risk not realizing any benefits at all. And I have a real life example that I'll share with you at the end of the presentation that I think is really going to illustrate kind of the risk that we take when we don't identify that why. Part of the challenge of identifying your why is that there's still this large gap between business leaders and data science practitioners. So, as a data scientist, I'm really focused on model accuracy and performance. Sometimes I miss the mark on the decisions that these models are enabling, and I kind of forget about the KPIs that my business partners use to make their decisions. And this is, I think, more normal than not, right? Because for many organizations, this is still more of an art than a science. And in fact, I've partnered with a lot of consultancies and vendors throughout my career to help me identify frameworks for driving and identifying ROA on the use case projects that I work on. And all of them exclusively start with asking two questions. What decisions are you trying to enable? And how do you do that today? Now, when we think about the decisions that we're trying to enable and we look at that framework that I have listed, the decisions are part of the effectiveness. How I do it today is tied to efficiency. So let me walk you through the three pillars of this framework. The first is cost, and that's really just a matter of identifying your all-in cost for developing models. The second, efficiency. So this is measuring the benefits of better processes and increased productivity. And then the last one being effectiveness. And this is really the heart of this calculation, right? It's measuring the benefit of better decision making. And here I list that it has to be tied to your organization's strategic initiatives, right? To strategic gains. So if you're looking to grow revenue, grow market share, or have better, deeper customer engagement. Right, so costs. I don't think this is a surprise, but a part of the calculus has to be cost, and it's taking in a full accounting of your costs, right? So the first thing that you also have to do when you think about your costs, your benefits, setting a time horizon and really understanding, are we looking to quantify ROA annually or over the course of X years? Because you might have some really deep upfront costs, even with efficiency, that it might make sense to have your time horizon be a little bit longer when doing the calculus. And then I list out tools, technology, and training, right? So this is part of your all-in costs, right? How much money will you be spending to enable a platform, to deploy your models, to build your models, right? But again, at the heart of this is that human interaction. How much time and money will you spend training both your practitioners to develop the models and your business users to use the outputs of those models? And I think sometimes what I've seen across the board is companies overlook the cost of change management. And again, without really taking in full accounting of your costs, you risk low adoption, right? Because you're not thinking about the training part, the human part, the human interaction piece of the change management and adoption. But once you have this, you have the first part of your equation when you're calculating ROA. The second part of your equation is efficiency. And so this is really process focused. And it's the way to calculate kind of efficiency gains or time better spent. And especially if you're early in your advanced analytics journey, or if your organization is early in their advanced analytics journey, the models that you're building are likely replacing something, right? So there's probably a process that's already in place, and you're looking to deploy a method that is going to make that process better, right? So how do we kind of calculate whether or not that the new process is making things better? Um, and so we have to take into consideration time spent uh, on the new process and the versus the old process, right? So not just time spent developing the model or developing those insights, but time spent maintaining and time spent kind of interacting, right, with those insights. Uh, and the point being that time saved should be time better spent. So if we're saving time in the long run by making our insights more accessible, more efficient, easier to maintain, how will this now saved time be used more effectively going forward? In other words, what are some of the other activities that will be enabled as a direct result of our advanced analytics initiatives? And so I go into that in the next slide here when we think about effectiveness. So this is the hardest to quantify, but again, as I said earlier, this is where you are most likely to reap your largest benefits. And I did want to give a shout out to Tableau. I sourced this chart from them, and they actually have three models following the same pillars: cost, efficiency, and effectiveness. And this I felt like was a really good representation of this last piece, right? So when we think about effectiveness, this is the benefit of better decision making. And it's really the product of the efficiencies that we were able to gain from the previous pillar. So now that we have more time, what do we do with it? Um, and as a maybe antidote from the COE, if we are not able to tie a project or a model to a strategic initiative, then we're just not going to work on it, right? It's not worth our time. There are no benefits to be gained from it besides some efficiency benefits, but the costs are too high, right? And so when I think about this piece again, this is the meatiest piece. It really has to have a direct tie to a strategic initiative at your organization. And you need to partner with business users who are able to make decisions to impact your strategic initiatives, right? So if they're not the decision makers, they're not your right business partners. Um, and so for us, what that means is we have to do a lot of research with our business partners to understand how they make those decisions, right? And there are a few questions that we ask as we do this discovery with them. We ask, how do you currently make your decisions, and how do you track the results of those decisions? What influences your decision, and how would this model enable you to make better decisions? A part of it, right, is that sometimes people just like keep business as normal, but these are KPIs that they track. And then there are some business users who see the KPI, who see your predicted outcome, and they're able to pull some levers. You need to partner with those folks who are able to pull those levers. Again, if you don't, you really risk not realizing any benefits of your advanced analytics models. Um, and so, as I'm talking about this, how do you do this, right? Like, how do you kind of simulate or learn from those better decisions? Or how do you prove that those decisions that were made as a result of your models were better? Um, there are two ways that are the most, I think, most common across the space. Those are simulations and test and learn programs. If your organization is early in their advanced analytics journey, then they will likely use simulations, and that's what we use through our machine learning platform. If you have a more robust AI ML program, then you likely have a test and learn program as a part of it, right? Where you can kind of split your population into a control group and an experiment group. You apply some changes to the experiment group based on a decision, and then you kind of evaluate the outcome of that. We do simulations through our machine learning platform. And so we have models that help us predict a certain outcome, and then we change the inputs to those models based on what we can actually change in the real world. And then we see what is the impact of that decision. And I see somebody saying pilot, and I think I'm using pilot and test and learn interchangeably. So you kind of pilot to a control set. But I felt like this was such a good slide to share a little bit about an experience that we had with an early machine learning model that we were looking to deploy at Quarters. And so I'll give you some a quick background on it, and it's regarding e-commerce traffic. So if you think about kind of at the onset of the pandemic, early on, stores were closing, and mom didn't really have a good way to buy clothes, right? But kids still needed clothes. She couldn't go to the store, so she shifts her shopping behaviors, and she's shopping online now, right? And we saw that across the board, but I think particularly for CPG companies, right? There was this shift in consumer behavior that now, by lack of choices, right, our consumers were buying online much more, and we saw that spike. And then throughout the course of the pandemic, right, things start to get a little bit under control. Then changing macroeconomic landscape, we see traffic, e-commerce traffic, begin to dip to pre-COVID levels, or even like lower than pre-COVID levels, right? And what we wanted to do was develop a way to better predict e-commerce traffic at a very granular level. And our model was able to predict that. So we were able to predict future traffic at an average, I think, 12% error rate, right? And that's pretty good. But when we worked with our business partner, we said, okay, well, given all of the factors that we've included in the algorithm, and knowing that we're able to predict traffic at a high degree of accuracy, what do you do with this information, right? And she really had nothing. She wasn't the one who was going to pull the levers. She wasn't the one who was going to make the decision to run a promotion or to target the audience a little bit differently to impact traffic. So we had to go back to the drawing board and we had to identify the right business partners who could change the outcome, right, given the information that we were giving them. And so I shared this example with you because it's so important to align your outcome, right? Your model's prediction with the business users and the things that they can change or impact at your company, right? You really have to dig for that why. And out of all of the framework that we've discussed today, we really can't forget that human component to your strategy. They have to focus as much on organizational learning as machine learning. And I always say that data is just data and models are just models until you use it to make a decision. And that decision is what delivers your ROA. Thank you. I know that I have 3 minutes left and I saw some people in the chat, so I will stay on for questions if you guys want to talk, but I also did want to save you guys some minutes to go and grab lunch before the next sessions. But thank you so much for joining me.